But now, okay, so then talking about This Isn't Me, because that isn't, at least in my mind, looking at that cover, looking at the title, that isn't overtly political, at least in my mind. But who knows? It may have been in yours. But you've explained elsewhere, and I was curious why the shoes on that cover, because I know that that means something. But
Well, Kevin Panner told me one time that when people would buy vans in Orange County, there were a couple different types you would buy. And the low top black off the walls, those were all Mahonies. You're buying all Mahonies if you got those, right? Cool, style matters. But the simple fact of the matter is, I was neck deep in a real resentment of the label based, fashion based codifying of hardcore presentation that I saw, particularly from New York at the time. And the idea that California was developing its own codes and its own standards was bothersome to me because this sense of alienation and this pushback and this rebellion personifies not these aesthetic markers, not these style choices. So it was like, these shoes, this black on black, which is, something that very much appeals to me. This isn't me. This isn't the point of the record. This isn't the statement we're here to make. This is the window dressing. Now, the song is something slightly more in depth, which just has to do with self realization and accepting that you're human and getting past any ignorant belief that you're a superhero. A big part of social conscience in the late 80s and early 90s seemed to be this messiah complex, which I don't think is necessary. You needn't be a holy person to present a righteous opinion, and you certainly needn't present yourself as one.
I think that's really interesting because This Isn't Me. What you're saying is this grand, it's it's an overarching theme that I think follows that record. It's like an umbrella, I think. But that cover, just the simplicity of that cover, it's a really interesting
Well,
contrast.
I shot the photo. Those are my shoes, and it's on my bed. Like, I think it's a nice piece of work. I'm very proud of it. And I had a really limited skill set back then, but that's all almost just happenstance, Like,
Gotcha.
rather than be overly intellectual, I should just say, yeah, it turned out cool.
Now, looking at something like "Destroy the Dream," and we're in
which
an
is a
on,
song which is a song I don't think lasted live more than one show.
but it's, you could say that it's sort of, it is as relevant then as it is now,
That one
and
might be more so.
right.
I mean, as adults, I think the concept of wage slavery or being nailed down to our financial needs is much more relevant now. I mean, most of us were living in the houses we grew up in when that song was written.
It's interesting to me because, and I wonder if there's got to be something written about this somewhere. So I'm not breaking new ground saying this, but like I think that COVID really, and the fact that a lot of people were forced to reassess so many things. I never like so many people this summer. There were so many emails from the school district that I work for that came out of people retiring, and these were people that I know have more time to work, and even people that I speak to that are our age and a little bit older. They're looking at retirement. Everyone's kind of looking to get out sooner. It seems. I'm just one. I really just sort of wonder, like, is that whole idea of you work your whole life and then you retire, like are people going for that more now? Like, what is your thought
I
about
don't
that?
know how the hell they're pulling it off. I mean, I make more money now than I've ever made. And yeah, over the course of the last year, I assumed the lion's share of my father's bills. But his bills really aren't that much. An 83-year-old man with Medicare, Medi-Cal has a surprising amount of his ass covered by the state. But still, I'm spending more out of necessity than I ever have, but I'm making considerably more than I ever have, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're still not. And I don't envision how I'll ever be able to retire.
Ever, like, you don't?
No, I don't. I don't. I don't. I don't see how it could be financially possible.
Gotcha.
I have. And you're in a similar situation. You sort of inherited the home you grew up in, and you have come to benefit from the responsibility of people who you were once their dependent. And now their work, whether they executed it well or not, now it's the roof over your head. Well, I happened into that and kept ignorantly selling those houses and walking away from it and buying businesses and pursuing my own my own ambitions, and all of those things are gone. And there is no family, there is no spouse to split these bills with, there is no offspring to catch me when I fall later to perform the task I'm performing for my father. So I better get good at some kind of desk work because these knees aren't going to last forever.
Gotcha. No. Gotcha. When you did the naked face, what was the reaction of the band? Like hearing you sing like that? Because it's called the naked face, but you're very naked as a performer when you're doing that. And
my harshest critic in that band was always Kevin Murphy, but he was also the one when he would say something kind, it made me, glow, right? And I always got the impression, the slow parts of that song, I just did something, right? That he would prefer very clumsy, drunken orthodonture to listening to that. But he said that when I open up and when I scream and then, all I'm saying, he said that gives him the chills, even long after it had been recorded and it came out. And that's coming from that guy, that's one of the greatest musical compliments I ever got. That's the only reaction from the band I really remember. What I remember is I was like, they were already making fun of you and saying you sound like a cross between Sean Stern and Sinatra when they heard me trying to sing live at the shows and trying to do a melody that was nothing like Carrie Nation. And then I went even slower, right? It turned out to be our most popular song, hands down. You get this great sing-along during Those Homophobic because people wanted to present themselves as progressive and on the cusp of things, but those same people were calling their friends fags in the parking lot. It was sort of this faux enlightenment. But everybody had their heart broken and everybody felt helpless and everybody felt like they couldn't have what they wanted in life. So people would go fucking batshit in the second half of The Naked Face. And that meant the world to me.
You mentioned that enlightenment, which segues nice into my question about Those Homophobic. Because, I look at you, Kevin Murphy, some other guys. You guys had a wokeness in the 90s that I'm not saying that I was unwoke. There were just things that I didn't think about. Like if I heard people use the term fag, it didn't there wasn't the alarm bell that goes off now when I work in a middle school and hear students say that to one another and I go, whoa. No,
right.
So where did that come from?
I think it was multifaceted, and when you say me and Kevin, and even Mario shared those convictions, and so did Josh. But I think particularly, I know for sure in Kevin and I's cases, but we were fairly sensitive, maybe even hypersensitive guys, like fairly vulnerable, easily broken guys. Now, I was in some physically large bands, some guerrilla corps, of my own. And I was a high school football player, and I was a god-awful boxer in my early teens. And I've always had some anger issues, and I'm missing teeth and can't use my left hand quite correctly because there's been plenty of violence in my life. But I've always been really tuned into other people's hurt. And alienation, anything that made people feel like they were on the outside, just always broke my heart. And how did I translate pain in my poor questionable state of emotional development? Angrily. I respond to it angrily. I've always been the anti-bully bully. Those Homophobic was kind of that. I did know some people had those feelings. I sometimes wondered whether I had my own curiosities on that front. But the one thing I did know is that it wasn't accepted in the world. And so that's on that specific issue. Now that overall sort of liberal, maybe left-leaning, maybe not liberal, maybe humanist trend in 411, I think we were just lucky to know each other. I don't think it had to do with any shared experience between us.
Yeah, and I only didn't bring up Mario and Josh just because I never actually spoke with them about that.
Your distaste for rhythm sections and your dislike for those two guys is legendary. So don't worry about it.
Especially Stanton. Stanton and I, we can't be in the same room together.
Yeah, let's not reconstruct. Let's not whitewash.
It's interesting that you bring that up about the whole being the anti-bully guy, just because One thing that I've always found interesting about you when you've like relayed stories to me about instances where you've had to kind of let certain people know that certain things weren't okay.
Mm-hmm.
You let them know that, and then you would sort of realize that like not that you'd hurt them, but that they like that they were really like being receptive to like what you were doing, and that
Okay.
and then it was going to stop, and then in the midst of you sort of showing them, hey, you don't act that way, you would sort of feel bad for them,
Sure.
and that aspect of your personality has always been intriguing to me
Well,
because
you and I have a ton of shared acquaintances, and you know some of them are not my favorite people in the world, or even if that seems a little bit harsh, they're not people I'm necessarily comfortable around. But I know that you also know this. You and I can sit around and make each other laugh and be kind of off color and talk some amazing shit over the cell phone, right? But you know that I can't stand to hurt people's feelings.
right.
Like even people who I don't necessarily like to be around, if I end up hearing that something I've said reached them when I didn't want it to, or when
Right.
it was intended only for you and I's private amusement, oh, I feel awful. I feel like I should just go die under a bridge somewhere. It's I went from really tiny private schools. My mother didn't have money, but there were little mom and pop private schools in Orange County when I was growing up that wouldn't break the family bank, right?
Not
And
even
so
modern day, not even like, because I always thought that was
I'm
like,
talking when I was in elementary school,
oh, okay,
okay? And they were little classrooms of like 8 or 9 people. Then my mother, who was raised Protestant, somehow thought as I was getting older, she should acknowledge my heritage, which I was, I came from a pronounced Irish Catholic family. And she enrolled me at St. Simon and Jude, big Catholic school, bigger classes, harsher social structure, and it ate me alive. There was a girl there that made fun of me all the time, and of course, needless to say, because she was hurting me and peeling scabs, I developed a huge crush on her. That went nowhere. Um, I picked fights with guys who would pick on me before I knew how to fight, and I would get my ass kicked, which made me ostracized horribly. Which made the situation even worse. That's what drove me to boxing and things like that. Um, I've always, really until punk rock, I've always felt like an outsider. And I found it painful. My first initial attempts at bands, at fanzines, everything used to circle around this acronym, the SIC, which was social identity crisis, because I couldn't think of a single situation. There was sick press, single situation where I felt natural or where I felt normal. And if you'll think about our larger group of friends here, and a quick nod to guys who annoy the shit out of me online, but who I find amusing in person, if like the Sloth Crew guys have a big outing, or Nelson and his friends, or a bunch of old people from hardcore get together, or there's a thing every year at High Royals where everybody gets together, right? I end up in the corner, quiet, sitting by myself and waiting for the world to come to me, because even after 40 years, my social instincts have just not improved much. I'm better on the mic than I am in the real world.
Well, do you think also that some of the reason why you've kind of been a bit more vocal about certain people that we know in certain bands that you've known for decades, kind of not playing new music, not writing new music, is because you mentioned about getting into punk rock and having it, kind of not finding a place where you felt at home and comfortable, and that maybe.
Well, I feel like a lot of people that I came up with, we found each other because we had been drawn to the need to shock the norm and to upset the apple cart, right?
Mm.
And their careers, at least creatively, have evolved into assuring the world that they will, in fact, bring the apple cart they expect with those same beautiful red apples they've come to love and adore. Well, I'm still here to knock the fucking thing over and try and find oranges.